Hello, Professor Bogus here. Want to talk to you for a few minutes about the main topic that you're going to be reading about in week one, which is rent seeking. Rent seeking is a term developed by an economist named Ann Kruger, but it was really popularized, explained, and expanded by Gordon Tullock. There probably isn't a real good, concise definition of rent seeking, as you'll read about in Tulloch's article that's assigned for this week. But I believe one good way of thinking about rent seeking is to think about it as the activities involved in trying to capture excessive revenues not related to production but related to political activity through political activity. Still, not a great definition, but let me give you an example because that's always much easier to understand than the definition when it comes to public choice. And there's an opportunity for some of you budding scholars out there to come up with a real good definition that is comprehensive enough to encapsulate all the things that we mean by rent seeking. Rent seeking is the idea that businesses, primarily we're talking about businesses, but it also applies to individuals. Businesses somehow capture revenues from the government, not by selling them stuff or providing them things, but by getting protection or special legislation or what we might refer to as loopholes. So, a firm that might be able to lobby a particular committee to get special treatment in a new piece of legislation that's being written, which protects them from foreign competition through a tariff or a quota, or protects them from domestic competition through maybe stringent regulations, which the older firms are grandfathered claused, and so therefore the new firms have to abide by them, but the old firms don't. Or possibly even just a direct subsidy where the government just appropriates money to a firm, or monopoly protection, where the firm is protected from competition because the government has declared it illegal for competition to exist. These are all forms of rent seeking. These are non productive activities that insulate the firm from competition and provide the firm with revenues not related to the production of their product or service. Other terms that we sometimes can use and you'll hear used regarding rent seeking include cronyism and favoritism, and of course, in some of the other countries that are more dictatorial or tyrannical, just outright nepotism. These are all elements of rent seeking. Now, what Tulloch argued, Gordon Tulloch, is that rent seeking leads to greater monopolization. That when you reduce the competition and you subsidize firms, you'll have more monopoly type behavior, less competition. And so what happens is that the firm uses these monopoly profits to engage in political activity to protect and to guard its legislation that protects it. So, for instance, let's say I run a firm and I'm a monopolist and a rent seeker. And I lobby my congressman, who's well placed on the committee, that I need protection from foreign competition. Well, what I might do if I get that protection, or even before I get that protection and imply it to the congressman, is to promise that we will be on his side when the next election comes around. That may mean money, it may mean campaign volunteers, it may mean use of the corporate jet, it may mean fundraisers, all sorts of things that congressmen desire, especially during election season. So I get the restriction. I don't have to face competition. I can raise my prices. I capture monopoly profits. I use those monopoly profits to pay for the lobbying, the corporate the political donations, and the political action committee money, and all the other stuff that we just talked about. And so, therefore, it's kind of a circular situation where the congressman also gets to capture some of the monopoly profits in the form of the kinds of things that he or she wants as well. So this is the nature of the rent-seeking relationship, or at least one version of the rent-seeking relationship. There are other versions of the rent-seeking relationship where sometimes the business wants to be left alone, but they get shook down by the congressman. This has happened on a number of occasions. One example of that kind of thing is called the Milker Bill, where a legislator will introduce a bill that they don't really intend to pass, but the bill itself does things that adversely affects a particular business or industry. And the whole point of introducing this bill and pushing it through is to get the industry or the business to give donations to the key committee members as a way to try to influence them to not vote for the bill, which is the purpose of the bill anyway, is to get the money. The bill was never going to pass, or at least probably wasn't going to pass. The whole purpose of the bill was to solicit the campaign donations. It's been implied in some of the research that this also happens in the Justice Department, where they will bring a suit, like an antitrust suit, against a firm with the idea in mind that the firm will then start getting politically active, start a political action committee, executives will start donating, jets will suddenly be made available for junkets for congressmen and senators, and so on and so forth, as a way to curry influence to get the bill killed. So this kind of relationship goes back and forth, and it is the nature of a government that has power and money to hand out, and businesses who want to be protected from competition, and of course are always interested in getting money as well. And so the two may not necessarily be a match made in heaven, certainly not in heaven, but they are certainly attracted to each other even over their own resistance, because they each have something the other wants, which is the nature of a market. This is truly a market, which is why public choice is one good way to go through and analyze the way these things work, because there is truly exchange going on between the various parties. Later on, we'll talk about exchange between congressmen and between bureaucrats and congressmen and between bureaucrats and the people. We'll talk about exchange between the executive branch and the bureaucratic branch. The legislative branch and the bureaucracy. There's all kinds of different exchanges going on. It's just not being priced like we think of in a market, and there aren't those prices that are delivering information. There's other ways that the information is being delivered, and there are other ways that people are responding to the incentives which they face. Hope this helps. Hope this helps explain some of the things you'll be looking at, some examples you'll be thinking about, and some of the material that you'll be reading about this coming week.